All right, everybody, we're going to put our heads together and really dive in today. We're going to talk about emotional health and stress, which seems pretty straightforward, but there is a big catch at the very beginning. Stress is a mental health term, which is different than the emotional health term. It's not quite compatible. We need a third party to figure this all out. So we're going to put that together just now. Now, knowing that mental health is more like rock, it's very solid. We think of density here, we think of porousness, we think of weight and mass and kilograms and kilos and pounds. This is mental health. And over here on the other side, we have emotional health. We're thinking water, we're thinking liquid, we're thinking viscosity, we're thinking liters, milliliters, and so on. Even though there might be terms that seem like they cross over, we might talk about crystals, which you kind of find in rocks and kind of find in water. We might talk about weight, which is we can measure rocks and we can measure water, but it is not the same. It is just confusing. So we have terms like stress that seem like they can cross over between mental health and emotional health, and it just doesn't quite give you the right picture. So today we're going to go into it and we're going to figure out, how does stress and emotional health work together? First thing we must note straight off the bat is that when dealing with stress, what are we really talking about? We're talking about a kind of friction against something that's flowing probably the other way. So where do we find this thing in the brain? We're going to think that mental health, the way of thought, way of thinking about a thing, is resisting emotional health, which is a way of finding a destination. So we're essentially walking backwards while looking towards where we want to go. That is exactly what's happening. Emotions are saying, hey, look at me, I'm over here. This is the good stuff. This is where growth happens. And the brain logically is saying, well, I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. I need to learn a few things first. So let me just keep walking backwards and see, really how to figure this thing out. And this is how you get the friction between these two things. The brain is working against the emotions. They haven't quite synced up. So does actually emotions cause stress? Not really. They're pretty clarifying. They reduce stress, actually. But if we are missing that thing that's in the middle, that gap, then we tend to make decisions that lack health or lack emotion in it, therefore causing stress. We choose to go to this concert that we don't really like and we'd rather do something else. We did it anyway, and then we have a bad time and we try to pretend like we're happy about it because our friends are happy. That is how complex that situation is, but it's kind of straightforward. You just went against who you were. However, it takes a lot of bravery, insight, experience to be able to come to the point where you can feel solid about emotion. It's a very tricky thing. So that all being said, we also have to note that when we're looking at the emotional health standpoint and when we're talking about the mental health standpoint, we can't use either to give the right context to each other, right? As soon as we go over here, we're thinking mental health, and we try to explain emotional health from a mental health standpoint, it doesn't quite add up. And if we're over here at emotional health, and we try to explain mental health processes, it doesn't quite add up, and we skew those pictures. So we need a third party, right? So we have our rock, we have our liquid. Where is our gas? Essentially, three states of matter, right? So our gas is up here. This is going to be self-care. It doesn't really lend too much to mental health, and it doesn't really lend too much to emotional health. It's kind of doing its own thing. It's in between these two states. So from that perspective, we're able to see both clearly. This is very good to keep in mind because our traditional way of looking at emotions is very much from a mental, more logical processing place, more scientific. However, emotions are a little bit more liquid than that. So we have to make sure that we don't have this bias. Essentially, we also have the additional perspective of emotional, energetic ways of looking at emotion. And this is on the other side of that very logical way, but again has its own quality that is not quite emotion itself, right? So we're using the self-care standpoint to navigate these two things, to be able to have the right perspective and use emotions in the way that they were functioned to be used, get the right properties from what emotion is. This is super exciting. This is kind of the first time I did a video really taking a look at the standpoint of mental health, emotional health, stress, and self-care, and how they kind of work together to figure each other out so that this year we can have a very strong model of emotional health objectively. Thank you very much for listening. My name is Noel Miller, self-care expert and specialist in exercise prescription. That being said, I almost forgot. I'm not very good with this promotion thing, but anyway, I will be creating a workshop coming up soon where we're going to really dive into a personal look at emotional health. I really want to be able to get people to understand the perspective of emotional health and how to put that first in a way that's not too rigid, not too logical, not too mental health based, and a way that is not too soft, not too quiet, not too dispersed, like emotional perspective. We want something that is functional. We can process these emotions, we can move forward, we can grow, we can become who we want to become, but not in the way of just having a compensation. So this is going to be very fun, very exciting. I'll keep you posted on the date. Thank you very much for listening.